Here.
Mr. Drabsky? Mr. LeBris?
Here.
Mr. Ladd? Mr. Marshall?
Here.
Mr. Partington?
Here.
Mr. Walters?
Here.
Mr. Zeller?
Here.
And Chairman Martin.
Present. Thank you. Can everybody has had an opportunity to take a look at the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Angeli. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, moving along. We have two sets of minutes. In the minutes of June 6th and the minutes of April 4. They are in multiple versions, drafts. They've been revised. Has everybody had an opportunity to take a look at them? And can we start with the April 4 minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Approved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Let's move on to the June 6th minutes.
So I have a point there.
Okay, June 6th.
June 6, page 6.
Wait.
What?
Put them on the table.
I'm sorry?
Gotta put it on the table.
Motion to.
Motion to-
Motion to approve.
Oh, wait a minute, no, he
Motion to
has,
approve.
Yes.
Motion
but
to
he
approve.
has issues.
Yeah,
before
we're
we-
gonna do that in
But
discussion.
Okay, motion.
he can't address until it's on the table.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
all right.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Okay, you have it,
Page 6,
yes,
on the hard copy,
yes.
third paragraph, starting, Vice Chair Partington,
Got it.
second sentence, he recalled that a previous Director of Public Works had made a number of major recommendations. It's actually
We
that a
made,
previous infrastructure task force had made a number of major
that is a major correction. I did not pick that up. He did not make that recommendation, the
Correct.
committee made the
but the
recommendation.
previous iteration of us
Okay,
made that.
anything else, Peter?
That's it.
That's it, with that correction? Do I have a motion to approve the June 6 minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you,
With
James.
With correction.
With corrections, yes, absolutely. All in favor?
Aye.
Moving along, okay. All right, old business, public works projects, funding request priorities. Okay, now, it's been a while since we were together. I think the last time we met, we made some recommendations for some, communication to the commission regarding our, recommendations on funding. Alan, did those ever make it to the commission?
They did, and they talked about it at the last meeting before the break. And generally, they received it and acknowledged it, and then they moved on.
And then they moved on. Okay, where are we in the budget process now?
Okay, so they released, and your recommendation came from before they released the draft budget, which is a memo came out, and you can go online and you can see the proposed budgets. That is now out on the street for what, about a month and a half now, maybe? And so the next step will be 2 budget hearings in September to approve them. And in the meantime, I'm sure there'll be some back and forth and adjustments, because a lot of it was based on predicted numbers, and you can probably talk the process better than I do.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, thank you.
in July, you get the final numbers from the property appraiser, so we
Right.
can, nail down what the ad valor.
How's it looking? How's it looking?
It's good, there was, we ended up with, 1.7 million, something like that.
More in revenue?
Something like that. Yeah, I have to go back and look at my notes, but there was additional revenue that wasn't expected, but then there were some additional expenses. I think the delta is about 600,000 of the additional revenue that really hasn't been allocated anywhere yet. And so now that we have the numbers final, then we have another joint meeting with the commission next month. And then, as Alan said, we have the budget adoption hearings in September.
In the published budget, the budget that's on the street right now, did the priorities that you had brought to us for consideration, did they make them all in?
Pretty much, yes. There was a few that did not, but by and large, they were accepted. Some of the notable changes was we had asked for and I gotta find it, an IT person to deal specifically with cyber security issues. They did not include that within our portion, but within the overall IT department, they'll still be able to provide those services. So we didn't get a separate position.
So you,
Doesn't matter to me as long as
there's a person,
I have that capability.
okay, good.
Do we have that capability now?
Well, yes, we do have within IT, we have cybersecurity people, however, based on the threats that are out there now, they are ramping up to provide more capacity than they have right now. Okay, and,
But isn't it more specialized, like for water
It
treatment
is
plants?
specialized. Well field,
from an IT perspective, it's still about moving electrons and firewalls and connections. So we have that framework in place with our SCADA systems and other stuff. The IT person doesn't care what it's connecting, they just care that the connections and how it's flowing data is secure and doing it within the right protocols. So they provide that, they don't worry so much, they don't care about what is the information that you're flowing, just that it's going through the IT systems in the proper way. So,
That's kind of, side with James here. There's one element of utility security that's different from home security, and that is the timing. I mean, how the system times out, how the facility is controlled. That
I'm not
is,
good. But
best example I could give you off the top of my head is GPS. GPS works because of timing. And I can spoof a GPS system into thinking that you think the fleet of ships is here, but it's really there. You don't have to worry about that in your house, but you do have to worry about that in a utility. If the timing signals are disrupted, they can wreck the grid or.
yes, so, but their concern is not what the information is flowing, but that we have the right firewalls and the protection for our system. And that's what their people will do. And we work with them all the time on the stuff. But rather than having a dedicated person funded by our department, it will still be funded within the IT general funded population. And they will provide that capacity, those capabilities to us.
You're comfortable with that?
As long as I have the right skills providing it, and it's not coming out of my budget, but it's still provided, I'm okay with that.
We're getting done.
Okay, well,
just a quick one. Where will we putting the priorities on intervention or prevention?
Dealing with
The
IT,
security, yes, with IT.
no, it's all about prevention, it's about firewalls and being aware of viruses that are coming out, having the right system in place that are doing scanning.
And one get us, what happened?
Then if you have an issue where you have a ransomware attack or something along those lines, I would defer to IT experts to advise us how to deal with it. I don't know about those. I know that IT people are a very hot commodity. They're very expensive to have quality people. And the only way to really get that is through the IT department. Don't ask an engineer to do that. You gotta have an IT person provide that.
Thank you.
That's the FBI system, isn't it?
Which one?
okay, so,
And I can give you a rundown of other highlights on the budget if you want it, but it kind of reflects what we talked about at the previous meeting.
I was personally concerned about the money going for the streets and sidewalks. Did that make it in?
Yes. The sidewalk master plan gap analysis, we received $180,000. The PCI, we received $180,000 to update that. We also got $330,000 to the PCI assessment of the alleyways.
That's good.
Within the roadway team, we received the 5 additional personnel that we asked for,
Good.
along with $150,000 increase in overtime pay, because a lot of the work has to happen at nighttime or on weekends, so we got increase there. Within the actual asphalt resurfacing, it was raised to 1.5 million, and the concrete and paver stones was raised to 1.5 million. Both of those were $500,000 increases.
That's good. Does anyone have any particular concerns of the items that we discussed going into the budget? Peter?
Well, this is more of a
big picture thing. So in this memo dated June the 10th that went to the commission about the preliminary budget, it says the CIP, this is page 4, CIP includes 26.7 million in general funds. Now, I don't know if you know, Alan, what the total amount of the general fund is, do you?
Within the
Where I'm
CIP.
going is, you just brought up the recommendation of 7%, and I'm wondering how close this 26.7 million is to 7% of the total general fund.
That I wouldn't be able to do off the top of my head.
A few years ago, it was in the ballpark, 7% was in the ballpark of 30 odd million. So it may be getting quite close to that. But perhaps for next time someone can look at that. Because we may be quite close to what this group recommended some time ago in terms of the amount of money that is dedicated to CIP projects from the general fund.
And yet it might be better to have a budget person come in and kind of talk to Grimshaw on that. And we can probably ask Laura Reese, the OMB director, to maybe talk through that. I do have in here, just within the general fund, it's 26.7 million that we increased, but or they're adding it for CIP for this upcoming year.
So, and within that, there's 3.6 million for bridge repairs and replacements. So, Omar will know what I'm going to ask. Will that take care of all of the bridges that are currently rated by FDOT structurally deficient? You know?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's, according to the budget we got online now, it's 438 million.
The general fund?
437.8.
The general fund? So, 10%
Would be 43.
is 43, right? So it's still under 7% would be, I can't do the maths, but
46%.
anyway, it's under 7%, but it's sort of getting closer now, I think. 7% of what did you say, 400 million?
437.8. 49.
This is
About 30 million, I think, would be 7%. So you're getting close. Which is, that basically answers it. So that's, I think, in terms of the big picture, that's fairly good news.
Has it been going up every year?
That I don't know, but it was nowhere near 7% like 6 or 7 years ago when the previous group made that recommendation. And
yeah.
Omar, the bridge question,
You
you
have to
have
ask.
this money in here for 3.6 million for bridge repairs.
Right.
I always ask it the same way. You're going to take care of all the bridges rated structurally deficient within this money or some other money.
well, that is for repairs, not for replacement.
No, but you can bring a bridge that's structurally deficient into compliance by repairing it. So,
I need to get the total. Yeah. What is the budget that we need?
yeah, well, just let me say it. I think there's not many bridges now that are rated structurally deficient, but it doesn't look very good for the city to have, and I don't know how many it is now, it may only be 3 or 4 bridges that are still rated structurally deficient, because when the public reads that, it's kind of scary. And indeed, it might be kind of scary in a sense that some of these bridges is the only way in and out of neighbourhoods. And, you know, if something could happen and they have to be closed, then, so,
So Peter, this 3.6 million for bridge repairs and replacements, that's Is it for replacements as well? Cause it says it's for both, repairs and
The-
replacements.
The CIP covers both, but typically when you have a bridge that you're replacing, it gets over that threshold, it becomes a separate
A separate
project.
item. So this goes into the general pot of repairs and replacements.
Yes, and so we could use a little for that, but usually once you get over the CIP threshold, you create a separate project and put money into it, which is how if you look at the current other bridges we have, we've created a separate P number and we track them because they have to be bid out separately,
Themselves.
not part of an annual program.
Gotcha. So in the budget, we have 1, 2, 3 bridges as separate line items that we're currently replacing?
Yes, the budget has, in '23, Bayview Drive Bridge is funded for design, Southeast 13th Street
Okay, I think
Bridge
that
funded for design.
addresses some of your issues.
Additional funding for Westlake Drive Bridge. And then also we have the other ones that were already in the program. But typically what happens is we put that money into that, it's a general category. And then as we do repairs on them or maintenance projects like, that, that we have in there, and then we will pull out some money if we have to create a separate bridge project for replacement and create a new P number for it when we move forward, if it's above that threshold.
Okay,
Okay.
yes, Ralph?
In regards to replacement, is there provisions for some of these older bridges that were built at a lower design elevation for boat traffic and that needs to be raised due to the current or future tidal increase in height?
Yes, and what we have done is we've identified, and I believe it's, several bridges that are functionally obsolete, either they're too low and with sea level rise and even, or they're structurally not strong enough to support larger vehicles. So they're identified as functionally obsolete and they are on the program for replacement. When we do replace them, we'll look at sea level rise, typically we'll have to raise it, we'll make them stronger, and we'll try and make it wider to make sure they have sidewalks on the side as well. And typically, when you improve the capacity of the bridge, it makes you eligible for more funding opportunities, grants or other things. That's one of the requirements with the county surtax program is you can't replace a bridge just like it is, you have to increase capacity on it. So you're looking to make it bigger, wider, provide bike lanes, something to make it more competitive to get the funding.
Realistic, and I'm sure that all
gotta
the
fire
tidal
those people.
waterways are in concert with the Corps of Army Engineers to raise that bridge since it's in their jurisdictional area.
The Corps of Engineers will permit it from an environmental point of view, to make sure you're not impacting endangered species or seagrass or something like that. They will also look at it from a navigability point of view, but mostly if it is a federally controlled channel that they're able to go in and do dredging on it. That's their primary concern.
Okay, well, thanks, that's good, I'm glad that's covered.
Okay, and the other question, you had another one? Because I had
Yes.
one.
Your question, I just got a
Me first?
statement.
Oh, okay. What was my question? Just went right out.
Want me to talk while
You
you
go,
think?
talk, I'm thinking.
So I just wanted
Do
to
it.
draw the committee's attention again to page 4 of the manager's memorandum. And under that list there, the preliminary budget includes one-time expenses that we can fund because of the 20 million one-time revenue received from the second tranche of the American Rescue Plan Act's revenue replacement. So this is a chunk of money being put in there from that one-time big American Rescue Plan. So in future years, of course, that will go away.
Right, and my question was, you talked about a joint public works and another department's maintenance facility to consolidate the maintenance work. Did that make it into the budget?
It is not directly in the budget right now. We are working with the Department of Sustainable Development to look at a joint use of the Plant A site where it will go. We already have about $4 million, and depending if we're able to share cost for in the design on it. Once we figure that out, then we will go in and we'll secure the remaining funding. But right now, we're trying to work with them for the design on it. And then the construction money would be in a future year appropriation.
future.
Once we figure that out.
Okay, so we're not this year, in a future year.
Right,
Because
we
you were
haven't
very,
designed it
you were
yet.
very hot on that, you were very enthusiastic, shall I say,
Yes.
about that facility and its benefits. So as long as it's proceeding, at least through the design phase, then I think we're okay.
Right, and it is.
Very good. Anybody else have any budget concerns? If this is gonna be our last opportunity, we're probably not gonna be speaking to the commission again about the budget.
Right, so the next budget, the next bad meeting is whenever the final recommendations from the board are made to the commission, that's August 11th.
Mhm.
Then there's joint commission meeting on the 15th, effectively relaying those recommendations. Board chair will be there for that meeting. And then that's
And that's it.
the
And then they
season
vote.
for bad, yeah.
Okay. Did you have something, Gerald? You had your hand up? No? Okay, so much for that item. We're finished with that item.
And Chair, just to clarify, I got my numbers, there was a 1.3 million additional ad valorem revenues than anticipated. And then another 600,000 in state revenues, so it's 2.4 million of additional revenues. There were additional expenses, 1.78 million were identified, including requests from the DDA for design.
Of the park.
As a park, yeah. So that still leaves a net 600,000.
More this year than we had last year.
Well, more than what was in the preliminary budget.
Oh, all right. So they're gonna be spending like drunken sailors now, right?
Sure, why not?
Sure, okay.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to water distribution system mapping. Ah, yes. How we doing? How's that coming?
So we are right now in the negotiation phase with the selected consultant. We're meeting actually tomorrow to finalize that agreement, and hopefully within the next few weeks after, we can issue an NTP so that we can start the work.
Okay, so we have put out the RFP, we have picked the consultants,
Yes,
and now we're negotiating with the consultants.
exactly.
And as soon as the negotiations are over, the consultant starts.
Yeah, so once we finish the negotiations, we draft the agreement, we send it to the commission for approval. And then when that is approved, it goes through the signatures process. Then we issue the NTP to the contractor consultant so that they can start doing the work.
And what is the estimated time of beginning?
Well, it's just, we are doing this in expedite time because it's a consent order project.
Aha,
So hopefully on the next commission meeting when they meet in September 6th, that's the estimated time when we're trying to bring it to the commission.
are we gonna make it on the consent order, or are we gonna have to ask for a delay or an extension?
We've already received an approved extension.
Oh, that's good.
For how long?
I believe they gave us an additional 17 months.
17 months.
So we should be able to make it in
Yes.
17 months.
So right now, we are estimating that we're gonna complete it on the time that they gave us the extension.
Okay, and could you just refresh our memory as to exactly what is in that scope of work? What will the consultant be doing?
So the consultant is gonna be tasked to actually do a water mapping of all our infrastructure, like the water mapping system within the city. And I think that is the only task that is per FEP requirement. However, the city is asking them to look into a little bit further into that, and they're going to do surveying and data collection on how many meters we have, and there are some other components, valves and et cetera, et cetera. So that
That's
they can
good.
make the map more complete than what actually the FDP has required us to do.
Great, that's
By
great.
condition.
Thursday or Friday.
That is not part of the scope.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, that's always the big question, the condition. But at least we will have a live GPS interactive map that shows where everything is. Sizes, capacity, or just pipe?
Well, it'll be used to inform and update the models that we already have. We already have a very accurate model to begin with for water capacity measurement purposes. And so anything that we find additional valves or valves that no longer exist or different size pipes as they're doing some of their soft dig locates of the underground infrastructure that's unknown, meters sensors and so forth, they will update the model that it currently exists to make sure that it is as accurate as possible, the new data. But as far as modeling goes, we already have that pretty accurate already.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? We've been waiting a long time for this. It's finally coming. No? Ralph?
Whole business, I didn't know if we wanted to incorporate that.
We'll do that at the end of the discussion. All right, well then, let's move on for from water distribution mapping to new business. Status update on the city's studies on its wells. Let's talk wells, ladies and gentlemen. How's the wells doing?
So, there is a report here from last year when the study was done. We're still waiting on getting an agreement for the civil consultants to continue with the study. That should be done, go to commission probably in September. Once we get that in the contract signed, we can continue with the other two phases of the wells. Now, we also doing other water testing for the wells. That's another task that we're it's not gonna be the exact same testing that we're doing for the wells. It's gonna be more related to water quality and things like that, but some of that was gonna be part of the study, so we're gonna try to combine them both and make sure we don't.
Are you talking about the stuff that we're doing with the water treatment plant contractor? How is that going? Have we got an interim agreement with them?
We signed an interim agreement about 3 months ago, which allows them to go in and do further analysis of the site, borings and siting on it, as well as doing a pilot in 5-ash to test out the membrane technology. So they are moving forward on the design. We're still negotiating terms that would be put into a comprehensive agreement. Probably will not be able to take anything to the commission before September or October. But we've been meeting with them pretty much on a weekly basis for the past 3 months. And in some cases more than that, talking about personnel, talking about exactly what will be built, how it will be built, what the city's responsibilities will be to connect it into our system, and what their responsibilities will be.
Will we be able to take a look at that comprehensive agreement at some point?
I would hope so, yes.
Before it's summer.
Yeah.
Right, and I need to say that we have not started actually looking at the comprehensive agreement yet. What we have been talking about is all the little pieces that will go into the agreement. You know,
Take
so-
your time, get all the little pieces together, but we'd like to see it. Yes, Walter?
What, from this pilot project, what are we trying to learn or establish?
The pilot.
Right. What they will do is they'll bring the membranes in and set up a pallet and see how well different membranes will process the water through it. So they can see what the right technology is. They have a general idea of what they want to use, but they got to do some testing on it to figure out exactly, to get from here to here as far as the preciseness of it and what it's filtering out and how it's.
So if they are piloting, testing, trying to learn what it takes to do the job, that is no cost to us.
It is completely on their cost.
So based on the water quality, they can decide this type of membrane is gonna foul less, so they gotta clean them less. So there are different options that they can use.
Okay.
So that's the purpose of this.
Yeah, as long as it's out of their pocket, I don't have a problem with it.
Peter and then Ralph.
So, is it the P3 dependent on or likely to be delayed by continuation of the work on this? This is completely separate.
It's completely separate.
Yes, Ralph?
So that process as far as membranes with 5-ash is going to be similar to what had occurred with the Peel Dixie plant.
I wasn't part of the Peel Dixie.
Well, that's with the membranes and everything, when they converted from the lime softening into the membranes, they,
I wasn't here during that time, so I don't know everything that happened.
well.
But the way they're supposed to do it now is the correct way to do it. And they just optimizing energy consumption based on the type of membranes, all that, so.
You know, well, that's good. Lessons learned from the Peel-Dixie time years back, you know, it'd always be good if making sure that we don't repeat, or not repeat it in the sense that we have, you know, the best equation for the water up here is being addressed.
Okay, Peter and then James? James?
One of the issues I recall with the membrane technology was there's water waste associated with it. Is that discussion a point of the comprehensive agreement where you're trying to limit that, or you use technology that meets the quality standards but also manages to not waste as much water? Is that part of the discussion at all?
It will be captured in there because part of the agreement will talk about exactly what quality of water we are turning over to them coming out of our wells, what their responsibilities are for pre-treatment, how it will be processed, and then how much water will be delivered afterwards. So yes, it will talk about wastage. The plant will require an injection well in order to get rid of that waste, so it will include how much will go to waste. And part of the optimization that Omar's talking about is how do you manage that?
The waste.
Right, and the electrical consumption that goes along with it.
Which we're paying for.
Yeah, I think it's also, it's like 15% of the production water that goes back down to the deep well injection.
It's 15,
Yeah, about 15%, just to answer your question.
How about a non-engineering question? Are we sending dirty water back into the aquifer?
No,
That's from the membrane, that's the discard.
This will go into an injection well, into
That's what I'm saying.
into a different area that where we're taking the water. So it's
Yeah, but
going-
isn't it all together somehow?
No, it's gonna go to a different layer, so they don't mix together. That's part of the injection well.
Alrighty. Okay. Is it possible, are any of our members here interested in seeing that interim agreement so you can see what the tasks are in the interim agreement?
I, for one, would like to see it.
Could we get a copy of that interim agreement?
Yeah,
public.
it is, it was at the commission meeting, I just gotta go and we'll find the link for it and then we can send you.
Just send the link to it, so anybody wants to use it as reading it a Saturday night, it's yours.
It's not that long, so.
Okay, so just to recap and be sure, the well field studies are still on stage one. Stage one is the only thing we've done. We're still waiting to do stage two, and then there's three. Okay. And how will that impact the new water treatment plant? It won't? They gotta deal with whatever is there now.
It's just gonna show what is the the shape of the wells, if they need maintenance, if they need to be rehabbed, those type of things. It's just gonna show the actual condition of the wells.
So,
That's their study, isn't it? Now you're confusing me, because I asked this, does progress on this
Right.
have any bearing on the P3 agreement? And you said no.
It does not.
But if we have to repair those wells,
It's still on us.
It's
We're
still
still
on us.
responsible for
Right.
making sure that the wells are properly maintained and everything.
and actually, in a minute, right now, the quality of water that we're delivering is X, okay? What happens if the quality of that water deteriorates because the wells need fixing, the wells are contaminated, they're leaking, whatever the P3 people are not responsible for that. We have to deliver the water to them at the quality it is at this moment when they sign the agreement.
Yes.
Okay, everybody got that?
There will be a standard in the comprehensive agreement that says what the minimum requirements for the water that we
Give
turn over to them and the minimum requirement for the water that they will deliver to us.
Got it.
And then if for some reason either one of the two conditions aren't met, then it will outline a process that we have to follow to get into compliance.
Gotcha, okay, yes.
My point was going to be that the wells will now have to produce 15% more water in order to satisfy the current water demand, because of the fact that 15% of that goes down into additional injection. So that's something to keep in mind.
It's about 12% because right now we have a 3% loss with the live system.
Okay,
it's
so
a-
the net is about 12.
And
Do
then-
we
and then
have
we
that much
have
water,
hurricane.
guys?
Yeah, but total is 15, right?
Do we have that much water on our permit? Can we pump up another 12% on our existing permit?
Wellfield, right?
A wellfield permit, right?
Right now.
Well, right now, we can't go and just change and increase the amount because
No.
it's allocations based on the Biscayne aquifer.
Correct.
From the Water Management District. So what the city did what, 3-4 years ago, was they bought an allocation
C5?
of 3 MGD from the C51 canal.
Gotcha.
If we need additional water, I think you'll have to either go through something like that to get an additional allocation, or you'd have to consider going and putting in wells to the Floridian aquifer, a different aquifer, and seeing if you can try and get additional allocation that way.
All
I
right,
think
but
the C51 route is probably the more likely approach, is to try and get water that way.
Right.
Yeah, that was my concern, that we're gonna require
More
more
water.
raw water in order to satisfy the existing.
hopefully that we don't need more raw water, period, with growth and other things.
Well, as the city continues to grow, the requirements will keep increasing, and we will have to, at some point in time, grow along with the city. But I think
Okay.
we still have several years before we get to that point.
Let's hope. Okay, very good. Anybody have any more questions about the status update on the city's study on its wells? We good? Okay, breakdown of the general fund towards public works. Actually, we talked a little bit about that during the budget. Is there something more that we would, anybody likes to talk about the breakdown of the general fund towards public works? The director seems to feel we're doing all right. I think we talked about that, yeah.
He gave it to us.
Okay. Map showing the run times of the basins near the completed relining projects. This was a very important part of our discussion at our last meeting. How are we doing with the relining? Is it making a difference? Yes.
So I have Hazen, they prepare a presentation showing the 6 basins that we completed for the consent order.
Okay then.
We can take a look at that.
I'm not exactly sure how to get this up.
While they're working on that, who is the consultant on the water mapping? Who did we hire on the water mapping?
The water mapping there where they still negotiating. the
Oh,
contract.
but didn't we pick a consultant?
They had the selections where they did the presentations.
Uh-huh.
They are negotiating, we haven't awarded the contract
Oh,
yet.
okay, all right, just curious.
Mark told me we have like an hour and 40 minutes to make this presentation.
No, I hope not, no, it's summertime.
I'm actually, we're gonna come over here.
You're on summertime time.
Yeah, don't think about it.
So, this is trying to be the sort of program manager for the sort of program, part of the program was, doing ionic repairs on some of the basins, right? And, we also did a model of the system.
Right.
So Ethan was in charge of making sure that the crews got out there and did all the rehabilitation, and Guillermo Regalado was in charge of actually building the model and running the model for the city. I'm gonna turn it over to these guys, and they have developed a methodology of trying to predict, how much improvement was made pre and post lining of the system. The issue is, unless you have pre-data, you don't know how effective it was, right? So we've come up with a methodology that we can use to systems and ascertain what the pre was, and then we have data on the post. And I'm gonna let you guys do it.
Okay.
Here you go.
Okay, so we would like to talk a little bit about the process that we implemented in order to assess the effectiveness of the gravity sewer rehabilitation program. And it involved evaluating flows at the wastewater treatment plant and also analyzing an energy consumption database for the individual pump stations, for which we were doing the rehabilitation of the gravity system. We'll present the data trend observations that we arrived at through that methodology, and then also some conclusions about savings that were realized in energy cost as a result of the infiltration and inflow reduction that the rehabilitation achieved.
outside of
Did I turn myself off? Here we go. Yeah. So the work began with a request from the city to help assess the efficiency and effectiveness of the rehabilitation program. There was the main focus was on reducing the infiltration and inflow. In particular, there were 6 pump station collection areas that were listed in the consent order, and those are the ones that we'll be focusing on today. Now, the challenge, as Trish had mentioned, is that we did not have any baseline data. There was no pre-rehabilitation flow data to tell us exactly what the conditions were before the work was initiated. Repair work was conducted over many years, but without that baseline flow data picture of the pre-rehabilitation condition, we had to come up with a different methodology to assess how effective that work was going to be. The city was able to provide energy consumption data for each of the pump stations that we worked with, and we developed a methodology to estimate the flow reduction in terms of inflow and infiltration reduction based on that information that was available.
You got a plus or minus what?
Pardon?
Plus or minus what?
Plus or minus what is a good question, and I think we'd kind of like to address that a little later if we could.
That's good, that's
You're
good.
getting a little ahead of us, but
I'm sorry.
that's a good question.
Let me
Wait a
ask
minute,
you
Ralph.
this, if I may. During your efforts in trying to determine the conditions of the, the old vitrified clay gravity sewer mains, did you, I know in the 90s, I know Broward County had videoed inside there. I think they went with like either in situ form or slip line contractors. What was the history for the city of Fort Lauderdale in doing that? Because I was with the county, and I know that I didn't believe that the city had gone and did any videoing and determining the condition, the deterioration of the various basins.
I think it was similar to what the county did.
Okay.
What was done here, typically you would do an evaluation
Right.
with video inspection and then make decisions about how to fix the problems that you find.
Right.
And that's what Ethan was doing for the last 3 years.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
making sure the contractors got out there.
I was just more curiosity back in the 90s. I wasn't aware. I was told that there was nothing being done at that time. But of course now we're all around the table trying to get this finished. Many of reasons that you alluded to.
So how did they pick the 7 basins to do the work in the first place? How did they make these priorities?
So, it's 6 basins, and they initially were picked depending on the severity of what they thought it was I&I. And the utilities team is the one that came up with those 6 basins.
I'm sorry, who?
The utilities team, because they're the ones that operate the whole system. So they're more familiar with the pump stations and the run times and all that. So
Okay.
they determine based on criticality, which ones were the most critical basins to start with.
So now we have the 6 basins,
Right.
okay, and now we know what the flow through those pumps were prior to the work, and we know the flow after the work. Flow.
That's what we're about to get into.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, let's go.
Yeah, good afternoon. Usually the 6 basins were picked prior to the consent order based on based on the run time and other parameters, but that criteria is based mostly in the needs and the condition of the rest of the infrastructure. So that it will, the basins that were picked were the ones that, in those basins that had high I&I, but also had not deficiency, because of the I&I being so high, the pumps in each basin couldn't handle the flow, and then therefore that it could be, there's another criteria that could be for probably for the next phase is going beyond those basins that show the problems because of the pump stations and the pumps and overcapacity. and can be start targeting other pumps, other basins that despite having enough pump capacity, they have a large INI that if reduced, they will produce other benefits to the city that savings to the city. So that's
All
what
right.
we want to do.
And also the fact that after the II took its effects on the various pumping stations, it trimmed the impellers of the pumps, which actually even made the pumps run longer and driving out that performance outside the efficiency curve, performance curve. So that was, that's compounding, it really compounded itself at the.
Correct. The INI happens almost in the most upstream part of the system. So any benefit or any improvements that we made in that regard from the INI, it helps also the pump stations. It helps avoiding flows, avoiding overflows, avoiding lack of capacity. It also helps the condition of the force main. Less material, less gravel and less sand in the pipes and less internal erosion, but also less improve the operations of the plant and the flows of the plant.
We're all converts to INI.
So,
Everybody
so
loves
that's the
INI.
point.
So I'm sorry we interrupted you.
So I want to start just describing how the typical flow, what we call a flow hydrogram, but it's just the pattern of flows of wastewater flows that any population will see or the plant will see. So what we have is what we call dry weather sewer flows. It's a flow that in this case is not affected for any storm event. So if we pick during the dry event, we will see that this is kind of the flow that we'll get at different type of the day. That means at 4 a.m. is when we have the lowest flow. Then we have kind of a peak around 8 to 9 a.m.
Everybody's going to work.
And then everybody goes back 6 to 7 p.m. and we have another peak. So that's what the plant sees and some of the pump station sees. But not all of this is actual domestic. Not all of this comes from the sinks or the toilets. There is a portion of this that is what we call INI. So we will use that term interchangeably today. Sometimes we call it groundwater infiltration, but when I say groundwater infiltration, what I mean is also INI. Is the same term that we use. So
I'm sorry. So even if it's not raining and storming, we still have INI coming up from the ground.
correct.
Is that right?
Exactly.
Because of the groundwater is coming up.
Correct. So most of our pipes are submerged under the groundwater table.
So it's a
So it's
combination.
every time, so that's why, if you see that in this case, it's 4 a.m., so nobody must be producing, for a few people are producing water. And some are still sending water to the system, but in some cases, we still have the flows are too high, and this is how, one of the clues that we have to estimate, to separate, to segregate, what portion of the pattern is groundwater infiltration and what portion of the pattern is actual base sanitary flow, and then we would have another thing for that. But that's what happens during a dry weather flow. How we got this, how we can get to that. In this case, we use a tool that we have, it's called Hazing Cube, but it uses some formulas and some description that is described by EPA in the toolbox that they have. So we have our own that have some more flexibility. And what we see here, the blue lines is the flow that arrives to the plant, to the GTL plant, so the flow that is being actually recorded. And what you have here, the black lines are the rainfall. So we have wind flows compared to the rainfall. So the first thing that the tool does is identify which of the periods here are dry periods that are not influenced by a rain event. And not influenced, it cannot be raining that day, but it has to be dry the week before, the week prior. So for example, here we just focus on this. And from that is when we have, if we zoom in, you will see a pattern like this. And this is just many days, but if you recognize the pattern that we saw before, it basically is the same pattern that we have here. So that's where the pattern that I showed in the previous slide came from this analysis.
Is that proportionately correct? Are we getting as much INI from the groundwater as we get from the wastewater? I mean, the red line looks like it follows the blue line. is that proportionally correct?
So this is the calculations that he came up with, which I'll let you.
Yeah, correct. In some cases, it changes basin by basin, but in some cases, that's proportionally correct.
Wow.
And the reason is, I mean, the way there is, also it's very difficult to estimate. So some rules, for example, they used to be in Miami-Dade, they used to measure the flows, check this, and they say 80% of this value is what is groundwater infiltration. But that depends on the composition of the basin, and there is so many other type of industry that generates flows at night. But in general terms, there are several methodologies that they know what is if there is this type of industry, that consumption should be constant. So there is the ratio between the minimum flow and the maximum is what the central ratio. And then with these measurements, there are different methodologies that allow us to estimate how much is the actual I&I. So that we can be applied several methodologies. But in summary, I think what we have out of the 35 MGD that arrives to the plant, between 15 and 18 would be I&I during the dry weather period.
15 to 18%.
MGD. So that's
MGD.
As a
Well,
percent?
that's at the percent, that's a lot of percent.
That's a lot of percent.
What is that as a percent?
That's almost
That
50%.
that is close to 50%, like 40 or
50%.
So those formula on the right-hand side there are different ways of trying to calculate this GWI, right? And I see the lowest one there come up with 85% virtually, so I can't quite read it.
It's 85%, where the percentage that we have here is the percent of the minimum flow that we wanted to put. That percentage
Oh, that's not there yet.
is not the total, it's not the percent of the total.
Well, I remember when we first started talking about this, we were estimating maybe 15% on I&I that was reaching the plant. Apparently, we were way down.
It was 30 to 40 or 50%.
Yeah,
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
I remember,
that was-
okay, well, the number is what the number is.
It sounds like you had a good estimate back then.
Right. So let's, what is our number now? Let's stop throwing around numbers. What is our number now?
We'll see. What happened
Okay.
is, well, we did that analysis year by year.
Okay.
So there is the number doesn't tell us much of how much we have reduced that with the I&I, because it's very dependent on the weather of that particular year. So, for example, if we had 2020, that I think was captured in the analysis, we have close to 80, 85 inches per year of rainfall as opposed to the normal, which is 50. So more rainfall means more events, and then those events that we're seeing with the spikes, that contributes to a larger flow at the end, a larger average at the end of the year, but also the groundwater elevation, the one ground table keeps a higher level longer than normal. So that if we are doing the analysis year by year, we will see that this is, for example, being the how we distribute, how we think there is a trend. We see that the flows are going down, but it's any calculation of the percent reduction that we have achieved with this one is gonna be masked with the other basins that we haven't touched, and also with the difference in weather in those other basins, it also doesn't give us enough information. There's too much noise in the data that we have that we can also pinpoint what is that.
The percentage. Isn't it true, Guillermo, I'm sorry to interrupt, isn't it true there's 187, is it, pump stations?
Yeah, 270. It depends on which ones we count. 278.
They haven't done the I&I work, only a portion of those.
Right.
A smaller portion, the worst condition ones, so. All of those things are, it's trending in the right direction. But there's so many variables, including what you said between weather, the economy, what people are visiting, there's a lot of variables. Probably mostly is the weather.
Correct. The weather has a bias in the calculation that we cannot using this comparison. It's difficult to estimate how much what is the efficacy of our improvements.
Guillermo, there was a question.
I'm trying to understand the third bullet point, other basins with no gravity sewer mains repairs add extra bias. Which way is the bias? Where is the bias? Let's go, where's the,
The bias, it could be, it is that we are saving and we are reducing I&I in some basins, but the other basins that have no repairs, they can be even getting worse, so the I&I.
so it's just,
It's over, so
Okay,
when
so-
we got.
Even if you had 50% reduction in 2 basins out of 100, and the other ones maybe got worse, overall, right, which is what this is, overall, you wouldn't necessarily see it.
so I look at this and say, well, it's trending, but really, is it?
Yeah, it's trending.
Exactly,
I think-
exactly. It's not, that's the point that the same.
Really? I mean, there's all these
conclusions we have.
issues.
Well, no, we weren't totally satisfied either.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is where we're going.
Which is where we're going. All right, but again, if a layperson would, if my neighbor was to ask me, all this money we're spending on this I&I, is it making a difference?
It will come. It will do the
Oh,
same.
let's then wait. I will wait.
So, we have
Worse than I
to,
am.
because of that question, we have to start thinking, well, it's another way to do that.
Okay.
So we have the constraints of the climate, the weather adds some noise to the data, some basins that don't have, so using the analysis where we do have an actual meter that constitutes the plant, it is not a good option. We don't have also flow meters at each pump station, because it is usually known, I don't think any utility in South Florida that has actually those meters. The meters add head losses, and head losses are also increasing the problems to the pump stations, and the meters are very difficult to maintain, especially at 117 parts, and it's a nightmare. So, but then we don't have that. But then when the city had a database with energy consumption. So energy consumption is a good indicator of how much flow we are sending to the pump station. There's a lot of caveats, because if we present these operations, for example, they will tell us no, but it depends on the pressure, depends on if we change the impeller, so there is a lot of things that can affect this, but the main driver is flows. And we're assuming that, and also the methodology that we're using, I'm not gonna go ahead, I'm gonna stop there. So we have an important energy consumption. And then what we can see, just see how the patterns change. And when we did the first, we try to do the first thing again, the same thing, just totalize the energy consumption for those basins and try to plot that. So we have this in a dashboard, and a fancy dashboard that tell us, okay, we have, if the using the station A7 is clear that we are lower. But while we have higher and when it goes up and down, so it's again the weather and the climate is adding bias to this calculation. But it's a good indicator. It was a good clue that okay, energy consumption may give us some information. So what we did is we come up with a methodology that picked a basin that didn't have any repairs and have maintained the conditions constant, and that will be our baseline benchmark. So for every month we say, okay, pump station A7 for the month of July 2017, the amount of kilowatt hours that consumed was X, and we compare that with the same month for the baseline, and then we give and then the next month we did the same, so we have a different dot. So because if it rained in A7 in the benchmark, I mean the city is not that big, so it could have also a wet month. So we can say that eliminates the bias that the weather had, because we are comparing the data point with data point with another pump station that didn't have, the only thing that changed is that didn't have repairs, but it had the same weather.
Just thinking another benchmark that we found was like the sugar sand that would accumulate at the headworks at the wastewater treatment plant, and and during the fixing of the worst ones, that's amount of sand starts to come back down, and that's another thing in addition to the II.
Talk to Justin about that.
Yeah, we did that also, but it was not incorporated here. And it was before we tried with the energy consumption we collected the data, the amount of grit that was recovered from the plants, and we plotted against the rainfall, and it has a perfect correlation. So and then of course that depends on the INI. But again, I would say that this is on the plan, so it will give us again the same bias that some
biases.
But that's the point that I was saying, that if we reduce INI, we reduce the amount of sand and even gravel that we can get from that, and then of course it extends the life of the force main or reduces the risk. So let me explain better with the so we have the basins the basin that we were mentioning before. We know when the rehab work started, when was the substantial completion date, and then we have data for before 2015. So what we did is we selected two distinctive periods in the analysis. What we call before repairs, the 2010-2014, and after repairs, which is 18 to 20. So we know that in most of the basins, in 18 to 20, was still some work being done, but most of the work, the important part, has been already finished. So we have these two, before and after, and we did this plot, this comparison with the first mark with the two systems. So how it looks like? It looks something like this. Let me walk you through this plot. First, we have whatever is gray is before the repair.
Okay.
Whatever is red is after the repairs.
Okay.
So the gray dots is when we're saying, for example, in a particular month before the repairs, we have in the D43, that this is analysis for the D43 station, we have 15,000 kilowatts hour, while in the reference basin that we picked, which is the A11, it had around 15,000 kilowatts hour. So we plotted before, every dot that you see in the gray one was before the repair. So do you see there is a trend line that is kind of similar. So when maximum here would be 20, well, in D43, 20,000 versus 25,000 in A11. What is the meaning of that? Those gray dots is that when we have higher consumption in A11, meaning because that month was particularly wet, then the D43 also increased that this slope is, this line is sloping upwards, so they increase at the same time. That was before the repairs. While we did the same analysis, we're using only the data after the repairs. And these are the red dots.
Okay.
So the red dot, the first thing that we see is that the complete trend is much lower. Everything went down. So whatever was before, let's say this point before in the so let's pick this one better. For 17,000, I could reach 16 or 17,000 kilowatts per hour in the benchmark. We have around 15,000 before the repairs. If we compare after the repairs, which would be this red one, for the same level, the same amount that had the same level, 17,000, the consumption was reduced to 9,000 in that pump station. So the only thing that we see here in this pump, in this station, and it's not seen in the rest, but it's interesting because every station has a pattern, is that it's flat. So that we can say that it reduces not only the normal INI that happens in the dry weather, that we were talking before, that even dry weather we have a lot of INI, but also it reduces the peaks that were coming out of that, because even when we increase the kilowatts hour in this basin, this one can remain flat. So it's kind of independent for the higher numbers. So we still have some INI that could come from the laterals, the private side, or other areas that was not decided was not to go there for the cost of the half. But also
I'm sorry for stopping you, but just so I don't lose this, the after repair capacity compared to before the capacity, is that capacity still there?
Yes. Yeah. So the pumps were not replaced. Yes, in some cases the work was done just the I&I, and then it was not repairs in the will come later, but if it's required or not. But in this case, the work was done, remove the I&I from the garbage pipes.
So would it be fair to say that after you improve the capacity, because the runtime pump station is less, which has actually arguably freed up capacity for additional load, i.e. So one way of looking at the capacity, the load created by a new development, would be to say, well, this basin now has improved capacity because it's all in line.
Correct, yeah, that's right, I misunderstood that. Yes, that's correct. So, but it's not a physical improvement in the capacities, because by removing I&I, now the basin can receive more flows.
Because the pump was running less, now it's starting
And
to
then
run
with the
more.
advantage is those new flows for new development are gonna be strictly base sanitary flows. So they are new development with new connections, with newer pipes, and they don't add to the I&I portion.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. So in some cases, the new development produces is just adding more water, but it's not proportional to the flows that are getting now, because the new development won't come, at least today, with more I&I.
So it would be fair to say if this is the capacity of the treatment plant, and this is how much water we're using now, how much we're putting into the treatment plant now, every time we repair a basin, this comes down.
Yeah.
Every time a new development comes in, it comes up, but it certainly doesn't come up as much as it came down.
Correct.
So at some point, we're gonna hit it.
Depending
But we got a lot of
Depending on the
room.
size of the development.
Yeah, well, that's true, at the rate we're going.
And depending
But
that
at
we-
some point, when we finish all the improvements we can make, then it's gonna start hitting it. But God only knows, you can't calculate when that's gonna be.
Correct,
We're
and
also-
depending that we don't stop in those 6, so there's more, and then.
I'm assuming that we're
it's
gonna keep going.
Keep going, so that is a wise investment, to invest in I&I, because it's in the upper side of the system, so the benefits cascade down.
Yes.
Another point too,
Right.
is that the Lomar plant has 5 well injections, and so
Yes,
they've been running
injections.
longer times too, but with the corrective lining, stopping in the groundwater, that will reduce that volume and run times on that. In fact, Lomar was saying something about they were contemplating a 6 deep injection well. But because of this program, they can wait a longer time until development or whatever comes along
That pushes
before
us.
they need that, to get that 6th well.
Okay, well, this is very good information, this is excellent. I don't know about you, but I think this is excellent information.
There's only one question I have is, what's the theoretical minimum I&I in a perfect pump station?
That's a question. Is taking into account that there is certain limits in where the city can go and repair, because it cannot go into repair private laterals. I would say that if we are in a 40 to 45%, that we can get down to between 15 and 20%, assuming everything is. I'm sorry, I should have sent that question to her.
No, I agree with what you said. Yeah, the private side is kind of the last frontier that's difficult to work on.
How much of our system is
Well, we gotta
private
fix it.
versus,
Well, there are ways of approaching it, but, you know, they're.
Send Roosevelt in, Time you get one section fixed, the others are deteriorating, and so you're fighting a no-win
To clarify the
situation.
question, is
Yeah.
we have the gravity line,
Right.
every building has a
coming in.
lateral that connects here, so the lateral belongs to the private
Right.
owner until the limit of the property, and the rest is from the city can repair it. That's correct.
Yep.
yeah,
So when the question, how much is private, is just at least 50% of the lateral.
A little more probably. It
50%.
tends to be a little shallower, because, you know, the part that the city owns is deeper because it goes down to meet the main, but it's more susceptible to inflow as a result of that.
Do you wanna say 20, average 20
I would-
feet per house or something
No,
like that?
probably a little more than
A
that,
little more.
yeah, to get from the house to the property line, if you think about the average length of that.
Per house, that's times at least 20 feet.
so a rough estimate would be about we're only affecting about 50% of the system.
No, I would.
More than that, because you're doing the mains and the manholes and the portion of the lateral that you own as the city.
And the other point is that the deeper the line, think about it, the
The
more
worse
pressure,
the worse the,
which means more water's gonna come in. So the laterals are still under some groundwater sometimes, but a lot.
so whatever that number is, it's not as critical as the city's portion of the system in terms of I
I'd say
and I.
yes, that's definitely a true statement, but is it significant? Critical versus significant?
Yeah.
It
That's
could
a
be
good way
a
to
little
say it.
significant. I mean, it's the numbers that he was just giving, right?
For example, just to say,
50%.
if we were to reduce, intervene every basin the same way that we're doing, we can reduce, you get a total reducing between 10 and 15 MGD, no, even more. Talking about
10 or 15.
10, let's say 10, 8 to 10 MGD for the average. And so that's a relief. So, and that would be assuming that with a full intervention, we cut I&I in half for in every basin. And that already is kind of get the low hanging fruit. That is with the easy to get to obtain the easier benefits to obtain. Usually, no, I don't have it here, but there is a graph that shows the benefits of the I&I versus the investment. To a point that you cannot. The more you add, the extra benefit that you can get is not. So it's kind of a sweet spot that then when you can just do this and then get the biggest bang from the buck.
And in the first 6 basins, how much did it cost us to make this amount of improvement? Do we know?
It's about 30 million that's spent
Oh, that's peanuts.
on those 6. Yeah.
Total 6 million.
It's peanuts.
It's a lot of work though, it's very
Time, yeah, but dollars. I mean, considering the amount of money we're spending on a water treatment plant, and what it would cost us to put a new injection well in,
Especially now.
$30 million is a
Well,
bargain.
the other part of that equation, too, if you don't mind my saying, is
Don't
that
you- do you
you're
agree or
reducing,
am I not
you're
reading this
reducing the I&I,
Yeah.
but you're also, you're saving costs by less run times.
Yeah,
And all this other, so
Absolutely.
it's kind of, yeah, you're paying this much, but you're also bringing down the additional operating.
So where's the next basin, Alan? Where's the next priority?
I think the B11 basin is in our CIP for right now. I don't have a listing of them here, but we have a listing of about $120 million worth of I&I work that
Coming on.
we're developing to prioritize which basin we'll go to next. And then as we look at the FY23 water and wastewater bond, which is a big tranche, we definitely want to prioritize those basins in the projects that we're proposing. But again, we did 6 basins and
Right now, we're working on like 3 or 4 basins.
yeah, we have some that are going on right now as well. The reduction though is, still, when you do all 186 pump station basins, we're talking about 15 MGD. So 6 basins didn't get us a huge reduction in it. And so we need a lot more than just those 6 in order to really see an appreciable difference.
But if somebody asks me, where's all this money going? What are you doing with all this money? I can say, here, I'm telling you what we're doing. Every dollar we put into this, into the I&I project, in the next bond fund, $30 million, okay? This is what you get.
Yes.
You get an improvement in the flow, you get an improvement in the energy, you get an improvement in saving the water treatment plant, it's a good thing.
Yes.
So I can say that to them.
If you
It's very
read,
helpful to say that to people.
if you read the comprehensive utility strategic master plan that came out in 2017, it said up to 50% of flows going to the plant is probably attributable to I&I, and that I&I reduction is the most cost-effective means that the city can employ to deal with its long-term wastewater needs. It does recognize that at some point as we grow, we will need to look at a 6 injection well. We'll have to look at other technologies to process it, but the most cost-effective means is I&I work.
What's the longevity of a lined pipe? Much life.
Line.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lining companies like to say 50 years. We would probably be a little less ambitious, 40,
And
35.
if it's a
and
durable-
asking for a friend, can you extrapolate that to a domestic 4-inch pipe?
I'm sorry, could you ask that again? We do line the
So
laterals.
if somebody
yeah.
had problem with their domestic 4-inch pipe, and they would consider lining, is 40 years a reasonable lifetime on a small
I think
pipe?
it is, yeah, there's less demand on a residential 4-inch than there is on an 8-inch main that's flowing, all the time.
Because there are conflicting opinions out there,
Okay.
my friend tells
No,
me.
the only thing, if you don't mind, I think you had it right, it's kind of a variable because it depends on what location that particular, let's say an 8-inch or 10-inch main is down the system. That's maybe, the correct way would be completing at the upper end, which most of it is close to or above the groundwater level. And then as you get deeper, you have more pressure on your system. So you want to start in the back and work towards the pumping station. Because anything you do at the pumping station, working away from the pumping station, you're still getting that sand eroding into your new improved
Right.
Lining. And so
That makes
that's the
sense.
methodology that you want to employ.
Not an engineer, but that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and that would be, that's what, I think that's what the decision that the city took, I think, was to intervene the entire basin. If in some cases, that portion that has the largest INI would be the one closest to the pump station, because those are the deeper, and the deeper the pipe, of course, the difference with the groundwater is higher, so there's more water coming in. So one would have thought that, okay, we line this first because that's where the more water is coming, but what you're saying is true. So that way, even though what I'm saying, the analysis cannot be done to just determine within the basin which are the areas that should be lined to get the best bang for the buck, because there will be some other factors, parameters that we mentioned. So that's where the entire basin will be.
Another added advantage is that slip line or, in lining the pipe is a lot more cost effective than having to dig up and going, especially down, 30, 40 feet. We've got some of them even deeper than that. And doing it open cut on that. So some of those are probably broken up that you might have to do that to some of those, but for the most part, that lining that pipe is really a godsend as far as
You can preempt a very expensive emergency repair that way.
Madam Chairwoman, how much time do you have?
I think, do you have any more? I mean, this was the point we needed to understand. Is there more to the?
We have the sections.
Oh, they all look like that.
I'll
That's
shut
good.
up here.
But
They all don't look like.
They don't.
And then-
No?
No, they don't.
Oh.
I mean, but no, the
Still good.
gray is
Well,
above the gray
yeah,
on most of them.
Well,
Red is
why would one not look as good? What would affect it? I mean-
For example, in some cases, it's because the data it hasn't finished, or there was some construction going on in a neighboring basin that some flows were rerouted, and that's what happens. So that will come. But in most of the cases, the gray is above the red one.
Reds are lower than the grays.
Yeah.
That's what you mean.
That's most
Good for
important.
And the other one is just the example that I was mentioning. I think that you would use that is the energy reduction of 41%, assuming because in the equation for calculate power is linear to flow, so we can assume if
You could actually calculate how much money we saved in electricity, or give us an estimate of how much money we saved in electricity, couldn't you? Oh, there you go.
Reduction in flow.
Reduction in flow.
And then it can go even further, like he was saying, so we can, by reduction in flow, we can estimate how much money is saved in operation of the entire system, and then in how much money is saved in any possible expansion of any unit in
Alan, if someone did a benefit cost analysis like that, it might be helpful, really, to have that in your pocket, that people come up and say, oh, we're spending so much money, but you can say, yeah, but look what we said.
Get it right back.
Yeah.
I would say that nobody has come up and challenged us on this program. So,
but
But
you-
you
Maybe
have-
did six,
it's good
when
to
you
have
have the
those
other
numbers.
187.
But this is another example of where you should take a bow, where you should spread the news, because we're going into election season, and all I'm hearing is, oh, infrastructure, we're not doing anything in the infrastructure. Of course we're doing stuff for the infrastructure, and this is statistically, proof.
Yeah.
So I would like to get a copy of this presentation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll send you a copy.
I'm
Please.
seeing this for the first time right now also.
Really?
I saw it.
And that's
I
why
will
you're
say-
smiling, Alan, right?
But I would say two things. First of all, as we're doing the lining on it, we're doing smoke testing now where you go out and do a lot of those. And what it does when you do that is people see smoke coming out of the private portion and it is causing them to go and do repairs on the private portions as well, which is something that, it's really hard to do, but it gets a concern. And I think they're looking at changing some state ordinances to allow more public funds to be used on the private side, recognizing this.
That would be nice.
The second thing that really is when we first started doing this in 2015, 16, 17, we had engineers sitting on the fourth floor who were looking at CCTV cameras of all these pipes and looking where every little crack was to develop a house water. We waste tons and tons of staff time reviewing videotapes and going out and videotaping it to decide that 80% of the system needs to be lined. So we're not wasting time doing that. When we decide we're going in based on the numbers, we're just doing 100%.
Sure, why wait?
Just line it.
Just line
You've
it.
got a good point. The older systems had what they called the Orangeburg laterals.
You want?
They weren't orange, they were actually like black and gray, but the Orangeburg, New York is where they manufactured. But point being is that those things were kind of an asphaltic composition. Over the years, they could collapse or they could do different things. So but most of the problems probably aren't coming out from the residential dwelling, but it's when they start diving down to connect to the gravity main. That length and that point is where it's hard to determine if there's any failures in there to fix, but.
Peter?
What is Hazen's opinion as to when the runtime pump as a percentage of a 24-hour day is a problem as far as capacity of that basin that that pump is serving?
So the rule of thumb is used by Dade County, it's really, I don't think Broward uses it, is 8 hours is safe, right?
8
So
hours.
only 30% run.
And the reason is, because each basin has a peaking factor, so there's a peak flow at the plant, but as you get smaller and smaller, if this makes sense, the peaks are higher, right? So, there would be an individual peak in this basin and this basin and this basin, and when they come together, they're gonna be offset a little bit, so the ultimate peak will be, a little bit less, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, the pump is only dealing with the one basin, right? So it has to accommodate the peak. And the peaks can be as much as 3, which is fairly normal, right, in a day, right? Based on population size of the basin and whatnot. So if you figure that you have 2 pumps typically in a pump station, and I only want to be able to rely on 1 pump because I want to be completely safe. That means I need to be able to pump 3 times the average, right, as a rate, which gives you, that's how you calculate the 8 hours, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing too is a lot of pump stations, they may have like 2 pumps or 3 pumps, but when you have a high infiltration and that comes in there heavy, the second pump kicks on generally to help the pumping. So that's part of the equation too. So you have more electrical use and it's trying to keep these pumps in their performance curve.
Yeah.
And you got too much, then it, like I said earlier, it just drives it out and it's.
My impression is we have quite a lot of pumps that run more, pump stations that run more than 8 hours a day.
And especially when the impellers are getting trimmed, they run more, so it's a defeating.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, like, I know Miami-Dade will go 10 up to 12, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but sort of as a rule, we try to keep it on the right?
Yeah, but the issue is that the big factor of 3, which is 24 divided by 8, is assuming that the effect of the storms is felt kind of immediate over the next 2 or 3 days. But in some cases, because of the groundwater conditions and because of Florida hydrology, the groundwater after a storm event gets high and stay high for weeks. So I remember some of the storms in December, operations have to keep the pumps running for 2 or 3 weeks to be able
bring it
to do
down.
that.
Right, so
Constant running the normal INI.
And so you have that.
It's not the peak, it's just what happens after that.
See, I was thinking about development, and unfortunately, with this sort of approach, there's not really a hard and fast number. There's probably a number that an engineer can defend as far as looking at adding X amount to it. 12 hours a day or something.
Well,
As part
actually-
of approval for every development, there is a capacity analysis letter that is put together, it goes to the DRC,
Yeah.
and calculates it looks at the pump run time and what the additional flows that the development will bring into it to see if it goes over 10, which is our city standard. And that
10 hours?
10
is the
10
standard.
hours for the NAPOD is the city standard, and that's what we're looking at from a pump station. But they do
So
calculate
that's
for
the
every
standard that you're holding to as far as looking at developments.
Yes.
If that pump station is already running 10 hours or more, then there's a problem putting more load onto it from the development. right?
Yeah, but
Yes.
you don't stop the development. You noted in the spreadsheet that there's a problem at this
Well-
pump station, and you're thinking about
But
changing that
doesn't
pump station or
the
adding
developer
it.
has to
Not a
do something
stop.
about that, or a combination of the developer and the city?
No.
I don't see that in the spreadsheet.
Not
The-
a pump station.
They don't. What they do is as part of their development, they will pay an impact fee to the city for the additional loads, and then we will do improvements.
But again, my
Eventually.
impression is the
Well, they-
impact fees go nowhere near the cost of what I&I is. That's an impression.
No, they will never contribute enough for us to do an I&I project. They will contribute into the overall, a portion based on
Yeah, on their load.
their load.
But if they're the straw that breaks the camel's back,
But also, is it fair to, 50 developments before added to it, but he was the one that finally broke it, so we're gonna make him pay for all of the improvements necessary. That's the trend, and that's
That
well,
why.
I think
that
I
would-
said that some comes from the developer and some would have to come from the city. And I suppose what the chair said is correct. You don't stop the development while you wait to collect the city's dollars. But that seems to me to be problematic because this is how big buildings get built and everybody wonders why bad things happen.
But if you can't handle the flows, then you've got to step up and stop the future developments.
Well, that's not
Future.
happening. Remember, we had this discussion
Yeah.
with Alan, okay? It is the city's responsibility to provide the capacity for all the development that is anticipated in the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. It is
But-
our responsibility.
But if it's just
And
the
they
same
will
way,
do projects to increase a water pipe size to get
Yeah.
where if it's gonna be impacting, we do some of those requirements, but we won't have them do a basin-wide or a pump station project as part of theirs. Only maybe upsizing a 8-inch water main to a 10-inch water main. Projects that are directly related to their impacts.
But you duly note in the spreadsheet that this pump station here is starting to get overloaded, which informs Alan's people that the first priority on pump stations is this one. Because this one's getting overloaded,
And as you remember,
which is
well,
what we wanted to bring to the commission's
exactly,
attention.
I was gonna say exactly
Ah.
that. And we weren't legally, we
And
can't do that.
Well, I don't see why legally. I understood, Alan, why legally we can't stop development based on capacity and even condition, because we're responsible for the condition. Unless there's a health emergency, that's an entirely different situation. Okay, this is marvelous. Have they answered? Thank you, Alan.
Good.
And Vicky
Good shit,
Eccles,
thank you. Good shit.
and Alan, Vicky Eccles says that you're her new hero. Okay, that's an inside joke. Okay, how are we doing here on our agenda? Summertime agenda, what did I do with my agenda? Oh, here it is, okay. Maps showing the run times, okay, Public Works update, this is our usual update. Do we have any particularly new and horrible things happening in water breaks in June?
Vesuvio level break.
Alrighty, let's talk about that. Omar, are you gonna do the water breaks? I see a 0 there.
Yeah. Water main breaks, zero.
We had one in,
Wait.
we had one in, well,
water
the
mains.
press release was related, July 26th.
A1A.
Sewer overflow, Seminole River Canal.
Yeah,
Manhole overflow, that's probably it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
That's it. But it's not, no,
Enforcement.
there were not any water main breaks.
There were no water.
No, but that water got into that sewage water got into the intracoastal because there was a, water use ban. or advisory.
Good lord, that's 15, is that 15 million gallons?
Yeah.
Boy, did DEP have a heart attack when they saw that?
I bet they did.
I'll bet they did. Are we gonna get a big fine for that one as well?
I'm not sure, I need to check with the utility guys, but I'm not sure. Do we have any more information on that? I had to check with them and see what.
Well, I guess next month we'll have more information about this particular one,
Yeah.
because that's a significant amount of. All right, okay,
Right, next.
that's the
That, it
information.
says manhole overflow, that the pipe didn't bust.
No,
It just says in the press release, it just says a sewer overflow.
well,
So that
that's
could be
man,
that.
Something had to cause the overflow.
Yeah.
So what
It's coming
was
from somewhere. Something broke.
Or something blocked.
or something blocked it and the flow was just flat flowing out. So
Cause
will
that
we'll
is
report on that
Southeast
next?
18th, that's down the low country.
Yeah.
I need to go back and get all that.
Let's see, blockage would push stuff come back up, yeah. Yeah, what a mess.
All right, next week, next month we can talk about that, where you'll have more information, okay? Very good. Okay, moving along, financial report, I think we talked about the budget significantly enough, I don't think we need to go any
They got
further
a
than
cute,
that.
they got a cute graphic on the website.
For the budget?
The overall budget site,
The city
cute
site.
in what respect?
It's graphical,
Oh, it's critical.
you can see,
Where the money went?
interactive a little bit, where's the money come from, where's the money go?
So it's all going to the police and fire, right? Right,
Always
police and
does.
fire,
Always
big
does.
time?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Always does.
That's a nice, it explains it well.
All right, general discussion and comments, committee members, yes, first you and then Ralph, yes.
Okay, I don't know if anybody here on the table, I just wanted to bring up that I watched the county commission discussion on the trains,
Okay,
CRT, New River Crossing.
mm-hmm,
I don't know if anyone else listened to that or saw that.
I was away.
the end of June.
how'd it go?
Well, I would summarize it by saying that, strictly my opinion, that they wanted to keep moving forward, they don't wanna lose the momentum. The only county commissioner that seemed to be in alignment with putting a tunnel in was the county commissioner who has most of Fort Lauderdale in his
Fisher?
district.
Lamar Fisher.
Fisher, right? And the others were pretty much, hell no, we can't afford this. And if Dean wants it, he's gonna have to find the money.
Ooh.
And then they seem to be in agreement that because they don't wanna lose momentum, they're gonna really try to move forward with the extension from Aventura up to the airport, the southern part, before they get to the New River, because that remains to be seen. But there was no decision on the local preferred alternative, and I think that will be coming in August or September soon.
Cool, yes, Peter.
So it was also my subsequent impression that the estimates done by the Department of Transportation had been handed over to the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, for them to take another look at the reasonableness, if that's such a word, of the accuracy of the estimates, because obviously the city's side it is challenging the number that the Department of Transportation has come up with. And I think that ball was passed over to the Metropolitan Planning Organization.
So my understanding was all the information they had so far has the number for the tunnel set at, say, $2 billion. And Dean and others were challenging that, so the city commission voted for a $375,000 review, and the commissioners approved that. That was, I think, at the beginning of June.
This is our city
Our
commission
city
defending
commissioners.
the
They're-
lesser estimate.
They're defending that they think that high estimate is too much.
From what I understand,
So,
there's supposed to be
one
a
of the
third party doing it.
One of the city commissioners, county commissioners rather, said, let's pay for half of that, because it's kind of like, we don't trust the city of Fort Lauderdale to hire their experts to come up with something. Let us be paying half of that, and it'll be a joint process, and we can all then agree with who the consultant is and how that gets done.
Yeah.
That seemed to be an agreement among them too. I don't know how it ever ended though, so.
That was the last status I knew of.
So it's,
Cooperation built on the third party.
well,
I
one,
think the third
one of
party is
the,
MPO.
one of the county
It's not a third
commissioners
party.
says, we couldn't even decide on this building. We couldn't decide where the flags are gonna be on the new building, the intergovernmental building. He says, we're never gonna have agreement on this. There will never be a consensus. So either Dean finds the money, or, it's just not gonna happen.
Okay. And we're not gonna have a joint facility either, a joint
No,
facility
They're
either.
they're not mutually independent.
Why are they not mutually independent? Okay, all right.
That's probably a benefit because
They're
you
balling
have
in my
one
backyard.
government agency and another one, and they'll have some difference in about the same building or who's doing what. So separatism is probably
Probably
a
smart.
good way to go, right?
Okay, as long as they don't move the county seat out to Plantation, which you
No, I
never
think they're
know.
gonna still build in the area.
You think, you hope? Okay, let's hope. All right, Ralph, you sent us all some, document, a proposal, a concern, you wanna discuss it?
Well, if you insist.
You didn't see it?
Good summary.
Yeah, it's, I'm looking at it, where we are now, about since I guess, Roosevelt, Maryland, and I started back in early 2017. And we're still basically on the same paths on a lot of these infrastructures. But I wanted to give a sort of a quick recap where we are, but more importantly, where are we going? And I'll just start with this, just only 5 items here that I put down. We just had a good session.
The thing that was sent out.
Sent out in the email, I don't think it's in these documents
No,
yet.
it's not in these documents. It was sent out email, and they took my name off, and they took my message off the lead into it, but I know Roosevelt and Maryland recognized my work with the run-on sentences and I and
Well, for future reference, I think if a member provides some information to the committee, it should be attributed to that member. Otherwise, it looked like it was coming from the department, so.
I thought it was from you. And I read
and
3
you-
sentences.
And then you was
That's-
Ralph.
it's gotta be
All right.
Ralph.
For future reference,
Guilty
Marie,
as
okay,
charged.
thank you.
Anyway, just to let's go through this quickly. I think item 1 with the sanitary gravity collection sewers, I mean, that hit it right here, so that's done. Number 2, the status of the police headquarters that the former city manager had told me that they were gonna have groundbreaking this spring. that didn't happen. I've talked to a couple of the police folks, and it seems like they're in a haze as far as what's happening. So that's one thing I would like to find out.
Next
Where-
item on the agenda,
Okay.
September.
Okay.
Further value engineering.
Yeah, September.
Police station?
Police
Yeah.
station, please.
Update.
Yep,
The headquarters right on 1300 West Broward Boulevard.
I hate that word value engineering,
Forward.
But as,
because they cheapen everything.
What word?
Value engineering.
but as I stated after my walkthrough, I would have condemned that building.
Yeah.
And that tells you a lot. And the city is supposed to be responsible in inspecting their own government buildings. So one government agency can't inspect another government agency's building. That's just the way it is. So
Okay.
the next item, number 3 here, is of course the 5-ash water treatment plant. And I think we addressed, we kind of
Right,
got.
we're gonna
where
get a
we-
copy of the interim agreement, and we've indicated our request to see the comprehensive agreement before it's signed.
Right. So that's good.
Is that 3 out of 3?
4, the replace upgrade of the old water transmission and water distribution mains, and the non-functional fire hydrants. I think that's ongoing. We've talked about that a number of times. But it's an important item, and I think we want to make sure that somebody's going to make sure the fire doesn't go out on that, those projects and stuff. So that's important. And then the ever popular, the 5th and last one that I had on here was the either the replacement or retrofitting of the existing stormwater drainage catch basins. And I have to applaud the city. Oh, there's only 3 people here. I had mentioned that during our last infrastructure meeting when Dr. Glassman was giving a presentation. And lo and behold, they went out to Imperial Point Drive and northeast 22nd Avenue intersection and pumped out all those catch basins that had standing water in them and cleaned them out. Of course, they're not an acceptable or approved regulatory catch basin system. They're not an exfiltration or are they a positive drainage. They're basically, I guess what Dr. Glassman was saying, that they've got a weak hole in the bottom, and that's one that's not regulatory approved. And secondly, that a lot of material gets into that and blocks that weep hole, so it becomes a holding tank. But the city got out there, the residents came and got a hold of me and applauded me. I said, no, I mentioned that at the last meeting, give the city their due credit for getting out there and listening and getting that done.
So can I have them done in Harbordale as well?
She's watching, by the way, she's watching the meeting because she's been texting me, so she probably heard
said
everything.
they
you
clean
said.
them twice a
Right.
year, right? They clean them twice a
Well,
year.
It's
So how about the Harbordale ones?
But anyway,
Fairmont doesn't get cleaned up.
the city is, and correct me if I'm wrong, some of those you can't really retrofit because of the fact they're not the volume in there to allow to put on slotted pipes to exfiltrate out, so they have to be replaced in their entirety, and so I understand that. So that hopefully will keep moving, and eventually the Imperial Point will have those the correct exfiltration type catch basins out there, because I get calls all the time. Where is there? The mosquitoes are coming out. So I'll donate 50 cents to this cause here. The other last thing was, Marilyn alluded to this, was like we have we'll be getting 3 new city commissioners, districts 1, 3, and 4. And we probably ought to be planning or trying to think about when we can meet with maybe the existing regime like we used to on fairly, once or twice a year
Mhm.
with the commissioners, and then also probably in the future with the new 3 commissioners, meet with them sometime after their board. Just a thought, just
No, I
something.
think it's a great thought, and I think that we should be thinking about the 3 new people.
And
I mean, they're gonna,
it should be soon after they elect.
soon after that, I mean, they're gonna walk in and they're gonna be bamboozled. And we need to sit down with them and, explain to them how this has progressed, where we're at, what are the important things. We gotta convert them to I&I, they don't know from I&I on the wall. Okay, yes.
I'm not sure I see the value in meeting with the current group.
No, no.
Well, I guess not. I mean, I was thinking in terms of trying to pull some information out on the 5-ash plan, but I think those
We'll get that.
probably, probably right now, they're focusing on their, well, at least 3 of them are focusing on their future aspirations in other political fields.
I do wanna bring up one thing about the 5-ash plant that I heard at one of the meetings, I think it was a Santec meeting, talking about the effect of the 5-ash plant on the rate structure. And it was, if I understood it correctly, it was very disturbing. The amount of increase in the water rates
Oh,
that
yeah,
are
I
gonna
had
be
that.
due to the 5-ash treatment plant as opposed to if we had just built a water
Yeah,
treatment
and then-
plant. And so I'd like to understand that number better, because
Okay, here's the
people are gonna
number.
ask that
Can you,
question.
can you elaborate on that
Yeah,
a bit?
here
I
you
don't-
go.
And
Ralph.
where is that coming from?
It's coming
It's-
from Santec. When Santec does, you know who Santec is, they're the
Stan-
guys,
Stantec.
Stantec. They're the guys who do all of our
Yeah.
rate projections.
Yes.
And I saw a presentation, and the
And they-
amount of
for-
money attributable, the amount of rate increase attributable to the new water treatment plant under the regime that the commission approved, the P3, it was like,
But I don't think that, is
50%.
that's not specific to P3, it would be any new plant.
no,
Why?
because the way this is structured, the P3 is structured, you're paying a profit to them. You're not just paying for the water, you're paying the equity,
You
the
make a-
profit.
You make a payment to them,
Yes.
but then if you build it yourself,
You don't make
you
a
have to
payment.
borrow the money and pay back
You're
on
supposed
a bond.
I understand what you're talking about, but the delta between what it would have cost us to build it ourselves, okay, without having to pay equity partners and points on the money, because they can't borrow it as cheaply as we can. And the profit that they take, 15-20% profit every year for running the facility. I am not 100%.
This sounds like something that Stantec has come out with though, after the decision was taken about the P3.
That's
And it
correct.
would have been relevant to the
Certainly would have been.
consideration of the P3.
It certainly would
And
have.
having read that
I
report, this is how it's gonna work out. In fact, one of our infrastructure task force meetings, there was a lady that was involved in it, and I said that, or asked her, I said, is it true, and I already knew it was, because I read the report and saw that it was approved, that in the next 5 fiscal years, it's gonna be, the current water rate is gonna be doubling.
Double.
And so this next fiscal year, it's either going up 30% or 25%. And the second fiscal year, is gonna be the 25, 30, 25%. And then the third fiscal year is 15%. And then the next 2 fiscal years, 4th and 5th, are gonna be something like 3.2 or 3.6% each. So that the cumulative percentage is going to be, increased 100%.
Well, I do remember a presentation that Stantec made to the commission many months ago, if not more than a year ago, where they were projecting what would have to happen to rates. But I don't remember anything where a delta was plugged in or apparent because of the P3 decision. So
Well, I
perhaps
think
through you, Chair, I can
perhaps what
ask
we
the
should do
staff
is
to
we should
find
have
this report.
that same presentation, at least, I think we should have that presentation here.
We should at least, I would like
Understand.
to
I
at
would like
least
to
see this,
understand. Yeah.
if this is some.
James,
Is it, my understanding of this is they're in the process of developing this comprehensive agreement, which has not come to fruition yet. So if the city can't come to an agreement with this P3 that they selected, then they have an option of going to the second choice for P3, or throw it out and say, let's do an RFP. Is that correct?
I believe that is
Is
correct.
that correct?
And just remember, we're gonna have 3 new commissioners.
Right. So, let's not give up hope just yet.
Well, all I'm saying is, I heard this, and I would like to have the right information. I would like to
I agree
understand.
with that.
I would like to have the right information, because it was concerning to me, let me put it that way. So, in addition to an update on the police station, perhaps at the next meeting, we can have that Stantec presentation.
So is Stantec made the presentation
Yes.
based on the P3?
Well,
I didn't say it was based on the P3.
I would
They
think
didn't-
I don't know they
it
were
was-
entwined, but it was, here's how we're gonna pay for this thing, part of the presentation.
Right,
So you want
The running costs, you gotta pay for the running costs in the future, therefore, what you get charged for water has to.
Yeah, I think Stantec gave us that presentation already.
no, this
No.
is new, this is
This is
brand
brand
new.
new.
From what the chair is saying,
I'll
it
find
sounds
it.
new.
I will find it for you.
Stantec had a presentation, the result of which the commission approved a rate structure going forward with increases projected in each year.
Right.
But there was, at that point, there was no
P3.
mention of a P3 in there. There
Right.
was mention of a replacement water plant
Right.
and a generic number was
Based on the
plugged
X
in.
number.
Yes, something like that.
It was like 5% a year that we were putting aside for the water treatment plant. So that in 5 years, we'd have like $40 million
Correct.
set aside. But now we're gonna throw that $40 million into the P3 plant, and we need more money. And they also talked about the fact that in the comprehensive agreement, we're talking about paying for a set amount of water, whether we use it or not.
Yes.
That,
Use it or lose
that
it.
to me, use it or lose it, to me,
That's
that's,
based on the P3.
Pay for it regardless.
that's based
Yes,
on the
draft
P3.
P3.
Right, and that's,
We're still negotiating.
I hope so.
Take-
I sincerely
take
hope
the
so.
pay.
So that's, I mean,
Use it.
yeah.
You know, I
Pay for it
asked this
regardless.
question before about the fiscal year increases on the water rate. Can you check on that? Because it was, I don't know, several months back.
I remember it too.
And I asked the lady that was here, and I said, I want to know, you know, with some definicy that this has been approved or not approved or what? And she said, it's been approved. And I'm sitting there, well, that's what I was afraid of. But I really need to find, you know, maybe she misunderstood me, I don't want to, you know, but, because I wrote an article on the damn thing. And in fact, I will shoot you all an article through our liaison.
Well, there's no question, Ralph, that the study and what was presented to the commission many months ago had some pretty significant increases projected out into the future. And they were, you know, worrying, to say the least. But now, what I'm hearing is those numbers are increasing specifically because of the decision to undertake a P3, right?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
But again, we need the facts, okay? So Omar, whether or not it's the Stantec presentation that I saw at the commission, which I'm sure would explain it, we need to have at the next meeting a discussion of the water rates going forward.
And I'll shoot you that article too that I wrote, because I based it solely on the communication and my understanding here at this, one of these meetings what we had, and, because it blew my socks off.
Okay, so he's got, Dr. Gassman just told me that was probably videotaped, that one.
It was videotaped, so we could get it.
You want the actual company to come here?
No,
and redo the
let's just do the videotape.
The
We don't wanna
videotape?
spend the money, just bring the
Okay.
videotape the next
Okay.
meeting, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Nancy.
And-
One of the things are we finished on that one? So got
Yeah,
another
we
one?
finished on that.
All right. Can I do one?
That's the one.
We have this wonderful piece of paper here that I was anticipating we were gonna have a discussion about. Opportunities for federal funding. This is a discussion of what we can expect out of the infrastructure bill.
Under the, what's it called? The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
Right.
1.2 trillion.
Obviously, it's summertime, and it would be nice to get out of here at a reasonable hour. Can we have the discussion about this at the next meeting?
Yeah, we should be able
Yeah.
to. Cause we're going.
We're working.
You're working on it
We're going
now?
after the majority of these already anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that at our next meeting as well.
Can you also look, when you're looking at this, I talked earlier about what was mentioned in the manager's memo about the build back federal money, 20 million had found its way. But there's also been some money coming out at state level for resiliency and,
The DeSantis money.
yeah, the DeSantis money, for want of a better description. Mitigation for rising sea levels, Rebuild Florida Mitigation General Infrastructure Program. So there's chunks of money that cities have obtained. Hallandale Beach and Hollywood spring to mind. They were reported on in public. So I'm not quite sure where the census money is coming from originally. Maybe that's out of Build Back Better as well. But it's finding its way to certain places. We haven't been one of them.
Okay, so money. Next meeting is money? Yes, James?
Doesn't this money though go to the state first and then they decide where it goes?
Gentlemen?
Is that how it works?
Most of it,
Federal
yes.
stuff?
Most
So
of
it
it,
gets
yeah.
filtered through Tallahassee, right?
Not all of it though, by any means.
But the grants go now, right? The grants will come direct, right?
Again, that's
Whether
kind
it's
of.
state or federal.
That's kind of a hard loaded question to answer, but I mean, federal money is usually given to the state and with the rules that the federal government sets for it, and then the state determines where they send it off to. Then also the counties sometimes get large chunks from the state, and then they decide who gets the money off of that too. So there are plenty of grants out there that we can apply directly to the federal government or to the state for. So it's kind of a hard one to answer, just blanket.
Yeah, which is why you need expertise in grant writing. I mean, it's a skill, it's not an easy thing to do. So,
But I think we got some pretty good grant writers here. They seem to do pretty good and getting grants, whether it's from the state or from the federal region.
in general, I would agree, but I've seen like 3 or 4 articles in the last 3 months where Hallandale Beach got a big chunk of money for doing exactly the sorts of things that we're doing for and having to do it out of bond funding. So, and Hollywood, which is very low, so it's only fair, I guess they do get money for resiliency, but they got a chunk of money for sea level rise from the state. So anyway.
Yeah, well,
We need to make sure we get a big bite of that,
Well,
because we got a lot of stuff going on.
You know what it is, that's the thing, it's not like,
and we have plans.
can we think of
We have
something?
plans, we know what to do.
Well,
All
yeah,
right.
we're in the process of right now actually actively working on, I can't remember the number, but at least 8 to 10 applications for about 50 million. So we're gonna be getting a lot more money now than we've gotten in the past. So we're applying for more than we have before.
A list would be lovely, unless it's classified.
I will see how much of it we can get to you.
Peter?
So, you had a position called city engineer, which was based over in sustainable development and was in charge of the review of developments, among other things. That person, city engineer, retired. So maybe next time, I'm concerned about that loss of expertise there in that particular role, which is physically in another place from the rest of engineering. So maybe you could give us an update on how that expertise is going to be replaced in sustainable development.
Yep, so Daniel Ray, who was working under Dennis Gershkin for probably about 2 years, quite frankly mentoring, to be honest, to end up with this job, has taken that particular position that Dennis had, which was dual titled with the city engineer as part of the title. So he currently is absorbed, at the very least for the purpose of our code and policy, the duties or responsibilities of city engineer. However, Public Works Engineering is working with sustainable development in order to parse out the pieces that belong properly in sustainable development for the purpose of controlling and monitoring and providing standards to external developments. And then for our side, as being traditionally the standards keepers and updaters, if you will, engineering, to have that aspect back in-house here. So it's not going to be one person or one position per se that's going to be the city engineer. It's going to be various aspects of the duties of the city engineer assigned to either a person or a department, meaning public works engineering and sustainable development. So we're working on changing the code, reviewing the code and seeing where we can better align what belongs at DSD as opposed to what really should be here in-house at public works engineering.
So who's gonna go to the DRC and review the developments?
The majority of that should be the land development manager, which is Daniel Ray right now. Yeah.
But if
And,
there's a specific engineering aspect to it, he can come to you guys.
He can if he needs to, yes. And again, we work closely with him already as it is because to put it simply, we have 3 or 4 employees that are actually public works employees, but they work directly under him over at DSD for the purpose of helping with DRC as well as capacity analysis for water and sewer and stormwater designs that come in from developments too. So we work directly with them all the time anyways.
So putting on my nitpicky type hat, I've always felt that function, somewhat inevitably because it's physically divorced, should be, closely monitored within engineering itself. And particularly with, Daniel's been doing the job in effect, right, for 2 years.
Yep.
So there shouldn't be any problem. But I think it would be advisable to, monitor.
Correct, and that's why, like I was saying, there are certain aspects or duties that are assigned right now, just blanket for the city engineer, that we feel the same way, that certain pieces should be much more closely monitored by engineering, which is public works. So, he is an engineer PE also, Just
FYI, there was a time when a lot of functions of the city engineer were written into the code of ordinances. So
Yep.
you may be aware of that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, gentlemen,
Thank you.
it's 4:02, summertime 4:02. Is there anything the staff would like to
I
add?
have a couple of things. She wanted me to tell you that they monitor those basins twice a year.
What?
They monitor the basins for maintenance twice a year, so they should be looking at those that you were asking about. She knows, she took a note. The
I've
other
been a
one,
pain in the neck.
the other thing is, these fees for overflows. The way it works is that DEP reviews at the end of the year what we had, and they have a prescriptive rate of X amounts, and they send us an invoice after they review whatever we did through the year, and then we pay those fines. So at the next meeting, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to have a number,
Okay,
but I'll have some.
that's the process.
That's the process.
Okay, so it's not that particular one is not gonna throw us into a new consent order?
Well, but it's part of the consent order,
Oh, it's part of the
It's
consent
part
order.
of the consent order.
Got it.
Yeah.
It
Okay,
is.
cool.
And there was a very brief discussion, or at least the topic of the public safety building was brought up, and just wanted to add that the construction fence around the public safety building property is supposed to go up today. I have not visually confirmed that, but today was the scheduled date for that.
Well, this is that
You
means
mean at
progress.
1300 West Broward Boulevard?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, because I've asked a number of police officers have asked me, because they knew I was, trying to advise everybody of the conditions of that building, which is horrible, that they were, and the city manager, Chris, before he left, he had told me it was gonna be starting that, so that sounds great. I'll get my camera and,
Yeah, please do, and we probably have people out there already, if not this week, we will, because we've had concerns about the alignment, not to get into it, but, we still have to operate fleet. We still have to get large trucks and vehicles in for supplies and maintenance, so we will
it's
be.
outstanding. That is outstanding. Thank you much.
All right, guys. Thank you all for
Motion to
coming.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. We adjourned? We are adjourned. I don't need a motion. We are adjourned.
That's right.
Okay, see you in September.
Be no further business.
See you in
That's a song.
That's a song, right.
When I was a teenager, I remember that one.
Thank you, Marie.
Excuse me, gentlemen.
the gentleman, I mean, the.
Yes, we've been here.
Yeah.
I've seen the name and everything.
Yeah, yeah, I've been here a couple times, and sometimes I have a nameplate and sometimes I don't. This is more for Alan.
Yeah.
That's not it.
There's so much tension right now between, maybe there always has been, and I just didn't know.
It's been going on for 10 years. The last 3 years. 4 months is long. You didn't like anything.
Yeah, yeah. You had